Hello everyone, welcome to lesson 82 of our Golang course. In this lesson, we will explore the use of context package in the context of Goroutines. No pun intended. Without wasting any time, let's get started. We have already covered the context package in one of the previous lessons in detail. To recap, the context package provides a way to communicate between different parts of your program, which also includes Goroutines. As you can see, here we have the context definition in the context package. The first thing it says is, a context carries a deadline, a cancellation signal, and other values across API boundaries. Context methods may be called by multiple Goroutines simultaneously, so it is safe to use between multiple Goroutines. That is, you don't need to lock the values. First method that we have is a deadline. The deadline method returns the time when the work done on behalf of this context should be cancelled. That is, if context has a deadline, the return value would be deadline. If the context has no deadline, the second value, that is, OK bool, will be false, indicating that there is no deadline associated with this context. Next, we have the done method. Done returns a channel that's closed when the work done on behalf of this context should be cancelled. Done may return nil if the context never cancelled. So basically, what done returns is a channel struct that is similar to what we were doing with our done channel. That is our custom done channel that we created to clean up Goroutines. There are different methods that can be used to create a context, like with cancel that returns the context and a cancel function that can be called to cancel that context or close the done channel. There's also with deadline, which closes the done channel when the deadline expires. And then there is with timeout that closes the done channel when the timeout expires on the context. As you can see in the example here, you can use the context done similar to how we use the custom done. That is, select on context done to listen for values and return the error. The error method returns nil when done is not yet closed. When done is closed, error returns a non-nil error explaining why the context was cancelled. Then there's a value method that we have covered extensively in the lesson dedicated to context. That is, this is used to set the key value pair on the context. Here we have two errors defined. First is the cancelled error and then the deadline exceeded error. These are the two errors that are returned from the error method when the context is cancelled or the deadline exceeds. Now to create the root context, we have two functions. Background, which is what you usually see in the Go code, and then there's a function called todo, which is like a placeholder for context when you're still writing your package but not sure how context will be used. Now if we look at the signature of with cancel, you can see it takes a parent context and returns a child context derived from it and a cancel function. This can then be used to cancel the derived context. Similarly, there's another which is without cancel. That means the context derived from the parent context cannot be cancelled with the cancel function. Then we have the function such as with deadline and with timeout. So that's a basic overview of the context package that we can use to work with Goroutines or clean after them. Now the question arises, how is this any different from the done channel we create? So here we have an example where we have the main function which calls function 1 and function 2. Function 1 further calls function 3 while function 2 calls function 4 and 5. So if you were passing done channel throughout this function chain or graph, if you were to close done in the main, all Goroutines executing these functions will exit. But what if you wanted to add a deadline at the function 2 level to the done we got from main? You cannot do that. So you cannot derive a new done channel from a done channel passed by main. This is where context comes into play. The parent Goroutine, that is our main Goroutine, may want to cancel the function. This is first requirement. Then a child Goroutine may want to cancel its grandchild. And then the third condition is we may want to clean up after Goroutines. And this is where context becomes useful. That is, at each level, you can derive the child context from its parent context using different functions provided by the context package. So the benefit of that is if the parent context is cancelled in main, all the derived context or the child context will be cancelled as well. But if one of the child context is cancelled, the parent context won't be cancelled. Few other things to notice that values of context cannot be mutated. So once created, context cannot be changed. That is why we have the functions provided by the context package to derive a new context from an existing context. Another thing to note is functions accepting the context cannot cancel it. And if the child coroutine needs to mutate a value, it needs to create a new context or derive a new context from the parent context. Now let us look at an example of using context to clean up after our Goroutines. For this, I'm going to use the example from our previous lesson. Context by convention is the first thing a function accepts. So I'm going to change this to say ctx context.context. Next, instead of doing this, we are going to listen to context.done and return. So this is very similar to the done channel. Here, instead of creating the done channel, we are going to use a context. So I can do context and the cancel function. Context.with cancel. I need to provide a parent context. To create the root parent context, we can use context.background. And then in the defer statement, we will just call the cancel function. Similarly, we can just pass the context here. So that's all you need to do. Now, we are making our function context aware, and the Goroutines will be cleaned when the context is cancelled. Let's run our program to make sure everything is working. Go run main.go. And as you can see, it's working as expected. Now, instead of doing everything here, what we can do is introduce another layer of function. Let's call this function run. It accepts a context, and then we will move all this to here. Then in our main, we will just call run and pass the context. Now, as I told you, from here, we are passing a parent context. Now, to derive a new context, we can use different methods. Before passing the context further, I can derive a context with timeout. Context.with timeout, parent context, and pass a timeout of 1 second. Let's also store the cancel. Let me move this up to the very top of the function definition. Then I can do defer cancel. Now, instead of passing the parent context, we can use the derived context, that is context with the timeout. So the context has a timeout of 1 second. Let's change it to something like 200 time.millisecond so that we can see how deadline cancels the calls to the Goroutines. Since our program is taking around 500 milliseconds to complete, clear the console, go run main.go, and as you can see, we were able to derive a child context with timeout, which timed out in about 200 milliseconds. And that did not affect the parent context. So if parent context was passed to other Goroutines, it won't affect it. So that is how we use context with Goroutines. If we were to read the error from the context when it was cancelled, we can use the error method. fmt println the error. Now let us see what we get printed when we run the function. From our expectations, it should be timed out. Go run main.go. And as you can see, context was cancelled, that is deadline exceeded, or the context timed out. So that's it for our lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please post a comment under the video or reach out to our Discord server. Until next time, happy coding.